The sun was rising behind the tall iron gates of the Grant mansion. Its golden light poured through the massive windows, lighting up every corner of the house like a spotlight on a stage. Everything inside looked perfect: polished floors, spotless furniture, and not a thing out of place. But no one ever stopped to think about who kept it that way. Maria moved quietly through the halls like a shadow. Her shoes were old and worn, but she never made a sound. She had worked in this house for 25 years. Every morning, before the family even woke up, she cleaned the kitchen, dusted the shelves, prepared breakfast, and made sure everything was just right. She wasn't just a maid. She had raised the grandchildren when they were young. She helped them tie their shoes, wiped their tears when they scraped their knees, and stayed up all night when they were sick. But now that they were grown up, they barely even looked at her. Maria gently straightened the pillows on the fancy couch in the living room. Then she moved to the grand piano, wiping the dust from its surface. None of the children played it anymore. It was just for decoration now, like so many things in this house. As she worked, she caught a glimpse of herself in the shiny black piano, her gray hair tied back in a simple bun, her eyes tired but kind. She stared for a moment, then looked away and kept working. Suddenly, voices came from upstairs. "Maria, my shirt is still wrinkled. Why can't she do anything right? I told her not to put jam on my toast. Does she ever listen?" The grandchildren were in their late 20s and early 30s now, rich, spoiled, and cold. They didn't say good morning. They didn't ask how she was doing. To them, Maria was just the maid. Someone to boss around, to blame when things weren't perfect. But Maria didn't argue. She never raised her voice. She simply nodded, kept her head down, and did her work. Day after day, year after year. She stayed quiet, but she saw everything. The only person who ever truly noticed her was Eleanor Grant, the elderly woman who owned the mansion. Eleanor had once been strong and sharp, but age and illness had taken their toll. She now used a wheelchair and spent most of her time in her bedroom. But even in her weakest moments, she always treated Maria with respect. "Thank you, Maria," she would whisper with a tired smile. "You're the only one who hasn't left me." Those words meant more to Maria than anything. Because behind closed doors, the grandchildren didn't care for their mother. They barely visited her. They were too busy with their own lives, parties, travel, money. But Maria? She stayed. She brushed Eleanor's hair, made her tea, sat beside her in silence when the nights were long. Not because she was paid to do it, but because she cared. And though no one knew it yet, everything was about to change. Maria, the invisible maid, would soon be at the center of a story no one saw coming. The sky outside the mansion turned gray as the morning passed. Clouds gathered slowly, casting soft shadows through the windows. Inside Eleanor's bedroom, the air was quiet, too quiet. Maria stood beside the old woman's bed, gently placing a warm blanket over her legs. Eleanor's breathing was slow, her eyes half open. Her voice, when she spoke, was weak and shaky. "Maria, how long have you been here now?" she asked with a faint smile. Maria sat on the edge of the bed and took her hand. 25 years, ma'am. Since your youngest was in diapers," she said, her voice soft. Eleanor nodded slowly, her eyes full of memories. "You stayed through everything. Even when my own children drifted away." Maria didn't answer. She didn't want to speak badly of them. But deep down she knew Eleanor was right. The children had changed over the years. When they were young, they laughed and hugged their mother. But now they only came into her room to ask for money or complain. Eleanor turned her head slightly. "I'm not blind, Maria. I see how they treat you, how they speak to me." Her eyes watered. "I've made many mistakes, but keeping you in this house wasn't one of them." Maria's chest tightened. She squeezed Eleanor's hand gently. "Don't talk like that. You're going to be okay. You just need rest." But deep inside, Maria could feel it. The time was near. Eleanor had grown weaker each day. She barely ate. She rarely smiled. Suddenly, the bedroom door opened without knocking. It was James, Eleanor's eldest son. Tall, well-dressed, with a phone in one hand and a frown on his face. "Mom, I need your signature on this property paper. Can we hurry this up? I have a lunch meeting." Maria stood up quickly, but Eleanor barely moved. Her eyes looked past James, tired and sad. "James, can't it wait?" she whispered. "It's important," he said sharply, walking over. Maria gently stepped in between them. "Sir, please. She needs rest." James glared at her. "Stay out of it. You're the maid, not the doctor." Maria's heart sank, but she said nothing. She stepped back, watching as James dropped the paper on the bed and pushed a pen into his mother's hand. Eleanor, with all the strength she had left, looked at him. All you ever want is my money, she said softly. You don't even ask how I feel. James didn't reply. He just looked at his watch and muttered, "We'll talk later." Then he walked out, the door slamming behind him. Maria sat back down, wiping a tear from Eleanor's cheek. "I'm here," she whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." Eleanor gave a faint smile. "That's why, everything will be yours, Maria?" Maria blinked in surprise. "What do you mean?" But Eleanor closed her eyes and drifted off to sleep, her hand still resting in Maria's. The rain began to tap gently against the windows. And in that quiet moment, something shifted. Maria didn't know it yet, but her entire life was about to change. 2 days later, the sun never rose for the Grant mansion. A thick silence filled the air, heavier than before. The lights were dim, the house cold. Eleanor Grant had passed away in her sleep. Maria stood outside Eleanor's bedroom door, holding a small white rose. Her hand shook. She had been the last person to see her alive, the one who had whispered goodbye when Eleanor took her final breath. But she hadn't cried, not yet. She was still numb. After 25 years of caring for the woman, loving her like family, it felt like the ground beneath her feet had disappeared. Downstairs, the family had gathered. James, Claire, and Henry, the 3 grandchildren, sat on the velvet couches in the living room, not out of sadness, but out of expectation. They weren't mourning. They were waiting. Waiting for the lawyer to arrive. James adjusted his tie, scrolling through his phone. "Finally. Now we can stop pretending and get to the important part," he muttered. Claire, sitting beside him with her nails freshly done, smirked. "Let's just hope Mom didn't give half of it to some charity. That would be a waste." Henry laughed. "Are you kidding? She was too sick to change anything. The estate is ours." Maria entered quietly, holding a tray with tea and biscuits. She placed it gently on the table, trying to be invisible like always. Claire rolled her eyes. "Oh, you're still here?" Maria nodded politely. "Just wanted to offer something warm. It's a sad day." James scoffed. "Yeah, sure. Sad. Anyway, don't get too comfortable. Your job's probably done now." Maria didn't respond. She just looked at the family, how different they were now. Cold. Distant. Like strangers in the home that once felt alive. A moment later, the front door opened. A man in a black suit stepped in. It was Mr. Wilson, the family's lawyer. He carried a thick folder and a serious face. "Good afternoon," he said, nodding. "I'm here to read Eleanor Grant's final will and testament." The room fell silent. Maria quietly turned to leave, but Mr. Wilson stopped her. "Maria, please stay. You've been asked to be present." All eyes turned to her. James frowned. Why would she need to be here? Mr. Wilson didn't answer. He simply opened the folder and began. "This is the last will of Eleanor Grant. Dated 6 months ago." The Grant children leaned in, expecting to hear their names and their shares of the fortune. But what came next made everyone freeze. Mr. Wilson adjusted his glasses and began to read from the will. The room was so silent you could hear the clock ticking on the wall. "To my eldest son James," he said, looking down at the paper, "I leave my gold cufflinks passed down from his grandfather. That is all." James blinked. "What?" he said, sitting up straight. "That's it? Just cufflinks?" Claire let out a small laugh, until Mr. Wilson spoke again. "To my only daughter Claire I leave my jewelry box. It holds the family pearls and a note from your grandmother. I hope you find meaning in them." Claire's smile dropped. "Wait, what about the house? The money?" Mr. Wilson continued. "To my youngest son Henry, I leave my piano. I pray you learn to slow down one day and maybe find a song worth playing." Henry stood up. "That can't be right. Just a piano? What about the bank accounts? The cars? This whole estate?" Mr. Wilson paused, then looked up. "And finally," he said clearly, "to the woman who stood beside me when no one else did, the one who took care of me, comforted me, and never asked for anything in return, I leave everything else I own. The house, the land, the bank accounts, the investments, all of it." There was a long pause, and then he spoke the name that shook the room. "To Maria Lopez." Silence. James's jaw dropped. Claire's hand flew to her mouth. Henry looked like he had just seen a ghost. Maria froze. Her heart stopped. "What? No, that must be a mistake," she whispered. Mr. Wilson smiled gently and handed her a letter, sealed with Eleanor's handwriting. "It's no mistake, Maria. Mrs. Grant updated her will 6 months ago, after you took care of her through her hardest days. She said you were the only one who truly loved her, that you never saw her as a burden. Maria's hands trembled as she opened the letter. Read, "Dear Maria, I've watched my children grow selfish, cold, and careless. But you stayed kind. You gave me love when no one else did. Everything I have is now yours, because you deserve a life full of peace and dignity. Live free, my dear. With all my heart. Eleanor." Maria's eyes filled with tears. She tried to speak, but no words came out. Meanwhile, the grandchildren stood in shock, speechless, angry, humiliated. Claire snapped, "She was just the maid. This isn't fair." But Mr. Wilson calmly replied, "It's exactly what Eleanor wanted. It's all legal and final." For the first time in her life, Maria wasn't invisible. She was now the owner of the house she once cleaned. And the people who ignored her? They were about to learn what it really meant to lose everything. The tension in the room exploded the moment Mr. Wilson left. James stood up and threw the teacup against the wall. It shattered into pieces. "This is insane. She was just a servant. A nobody," he shouted, his face red with anger. Claire clutched her designer purse like it would protect her. "We should call our lawyer. This can't be legal." Our mother must have been confused. Henry looked at Maria, his eyes filled with disbelief. "You tricked her, didn't you? What did you do to make her change the will?" Maria stood frozen near the doorway, holding the letter tightly to her chest. Her hands were shaking, but her voice came out calm and soft. "I didn't ask for anything. I loved her. That's all." James walked toward her, pointing a finger in her face. "You gold-digging snake. You think you're going to live in our house now? You better get out before I call security." Maria looked around the room, the place she had dusted every day, the walls she had wiped clean, the floors she had mopped for years. She didn't feel proud. She didn't feel victorious. She felt broken. Not because of the money or the house, but because Eleanor's own children didn't shed a single tear. Claire stepped forward, crossing her arms. "This isn't over. You think you're smart, but we're Grants. We'll make sure you get nothing." Maria finally spoke again, her voice steadier this time. "You're right. I'm not a Grant. I don't have a famous name. But I gave your mother the love she needed when you were too busy. I held her hand when she cried at night. I wiped her tears, fed her soup, and sang to her when she couldn't sleep." Her voice cracked as she said the next words. "I didn't win anything. I lost someone I loved like a mother." Silence. Even Henry, who usually joked about everything, looked down at his shoes. Maria turned away and walked toward the stairs, still holding the letter in her hand. The same stairs she used to sweep, now leading to the master bedroom that was hers, whether she wanted it or not. But before she reached the top, James yelled one last time. "Don't get too comfortable, Maid. We'll find a way to take it all back." Maria stopped. Then she turned around slowly, tears in her eyes but fire in her voice. "You already took everything from her. There's nothing left for you to steal." And with that, she disappeared upstairs, leaving behind 3 grown children who had just realized the house was no longer theirs, and maybe never truly was. That night, the Grant mansion was quiet. Too quiet. Maria sat alone in the master bedroom, the same room where Eleanor had taken her last breath. The lights were soft, the curtains still tied back the way Eleanor liked. Her scent lingered in the air, lavender and old books. Maria looked around the room. It didn't feel like hers. Not yet. Maybe not ever. She opened the bedside drawer and found an old photo album. Her fingers traced the worn leather cover before she gently opened it. There she was, Eleanor in her younger years. Smiling. Holding baby James. Then Claire. Then Henry. Page after page, a whole life unfolded before Maria's eyes. Family birthdays. Vacations. Christmas mornings. But as the years passed in those photos, something changed. The smiles disappeared. The hugs stopped. The distance grew wider. Eleanor started to look lonelier. Maria's heart ached. She remembered those evenings, how Eleanor would wait by the phone for a call that never came. How she always said, "Maybe they're just busy. Maybe next week." How she'd smile through her pain and say she understood. Maria had seen it all. She had seen the woman not as Mrs. Grant, but as Eleanor. A mother. A human being who longed for love. Tears rolled down Maria's cheeks as she whispered, "You didn't deserve that. You gave them everything." Suddenly there was a knock at the door. Maria wiped her eyes and opened it. It was Mr. Wilson holding a small box. "Maria, I forgot to give you this earlier. Eleanor asked me to personally hand it to you." He gave her the box and left quietly. Maria sat down and slowly opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter and a delicate gold chain. The letter read, "Dear Maria, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I know this must be hard for you and I'm sorry I left you with such a mess. But I also know you have a heart stronger than any steel. I watched my children chase money, but I watched you give love. Every day. Without asking for anything. I'm giving you this house not just because you earned it, but because I want you to finally have peace. You spent your life serving others. Now it's time someone gave you something back. You are my daughter in every way that matters. With all the love I never said enough. Eleanor. Maria held the chain to her chest, sobbing quietly. She didn't care about the mansion, or the money, or the title. She cared about that letter, and the woman who wrote it. And in that moment she finally allowed herself to grieve, not as a maid, but as a daughter who had just lost her mother. Downstairs, the Grant siblings were anything but quiet. James paced the living room floor like a trapped animal, his jaw clenched, fists tight. Claire was on her phone, talking loudly to someone. No, I don't care what the will says. She was a maid. There has to be a way around it. File something. A motion, a lawsuit, anything. Henry sat on the edge of the sofa, chewing his nails. This is bad, he mumbled. Our names are going to be in the papers. The maid got everything. We'll be the joke of the year. James stopped pacing. No. This isn't over, he said, eyes burning. We're not walking away with nothing. He grabbed a folder from the side table. Inside it were old documents, property deeds, business reports, and bank statements. Anything that might help him twist the story. Claire hung up her call and looked over. What are you doing? We'll fight her, James said coldly. We'll drag her into court. The will could be fake. Or forged. Or, maybe she manipulated Mom when she was sick. Henry looked unsure. But, what if it's real? What if Mom really wanted this? Claire snapped. Oh, please. Don't grow a conscience now, Henry. We deserve that money. We're family. James nodded. And she's just the help. Always has been. She got lucky, that's all. Their voices grew louder, angrier. The plan was clear. They would do whatever it took to take back what they thought was theirs. But upstairs, Maria already knew this fight was coming. She stood at the top of the stairs, hidden in the shadows, listening to every word. Her heart hurt, not from fear but from disappointment. They hadn't changed. Not even after losing their mother. Not even after hearing the will. She clutched Eleanor's letter tighter in her hand. They don't want justice, she whispered. They want revenge. But Maria also knew something else. Eleanor hadn't just left her money. She had left her something far more powerful, the truth. And Maria was ready to defend it, with everything she had. The next morning, Maria stood in the kitchen, the same place where she had once cooked breakfast for the Grant family without a thank you. But today the apron was gone. Her shoulders were back. Her hands were steady. She wasn't just the maid anymore. She was the owner of the house. She had spent the whole night thinking, not about the money or the mansion, but about what Eleanor would have wanted her to do. She looked out the kitchen window where sunlight poured in gently. In that moment she felt peace, and she made a decision. Maria picked up the phone and called Mr. Wilson. Good morning, Maria, he answered. Is everything all right? Her voice was calm but firm. Mr. Wilson, I need to talk to you. Not about changing the will, I won't do that. But I want to ask something else. Later that day, the Grant siblings returned to the house, expecting a fight. They were dressed in black suits and fake smiles, trying to look formal, but their eyes were sharp and cold. Maria greeted them in the living room. No servants. No silence. Just her standing proud. I know why you're here, she said before they could speak. You want what your mother left me. James stepped forward. We deserve it. You think cleaning some floors gives you the right to take our inheritance? Maria didn't flinch. No, she said quietly. Loving your mother gave me that right. Claire scoffed. Please. You're just trying to play the victim. Maria walked over to the table and placed a stack of papers down. These are all the documents Mr. Wilson gave me. Proof of everything your mother owned. And yes, it's all legally mine now. Henry's mouth opened slightly, unsure what to say. Maria paused, then said something none of them expected. But I'm not going to keep it all. They froze. What? Claire said. I've decided, Maria continued. Your mother wanted me to live with peace. I can't have that if I'm constantly fighting. So I'm donating half of her wealth to a foundation in her name. A charity for women who've worked their whole lives in silence like I did. James stepped back shocked. You're giving it away? Maria nodded. Yes. In the house I'll stay here. But not as a trophy. As a memory. A reminder of what love can give, and what greed can destroy. Claire looked away ashamed. For once, even her sharp tongue had no answer. Maria looked each of them in the eye. You can fight me. You can sue. But your mother already made her choice. She gave her heart to someone who still remembers how to use one. Silence filled the room. And for the first time, the power had shifted completely. Maria didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. She had the truth on her side, and it was louder than anything they could say. Days passed. The once lively Grant mansion felt heavy now. Not because of furniture or money, but because of truth. Maria continued to live there, not as a maid, not as a stranger, but as someone who finally had her own place. She spent her mornings watering the garden Eleanor loved, and her nights reading in the library Eleanor built. Every room held memories, and now they were hers to protect. But outside those walls, things were falling apart for the grandchildren. James tried to fight the will in court, but every lawyer told him the same thing: it's solid. There's no way around it. Even worse, some newspapers caught the story. The headlines were brutal. Maid inherits fortune while children left with nothing. Was this love or neglect? The truth about the Grants. Claire lost a brand deal she had lined up. Sponsors didn't want their name linked to the forgotten daughter of a heartless family. Her social media followers dropped. No one felt sorry for her. The internet had already chosen its hero, Maria. Henry, who never cared much about anything, started to feel the emptiness. He would sit alone in his apartment, scrolling through old photos of his mother. In each picture he saw it now, the sadness in her eyes. He remembered the last birthday she called him. He had ignored it. Now she was gone. And the woman who stayed by her side until the very end was the same one they had mocked. The guilt sat heavy on all three of them. But none of them called Maria. They couldn't. They were too proud. Too late. Back at the mansion, Maria received a letter in the mail. It was from Eleanor's childhood best friend, a woman named Margaret. The letter read, "Dear Maria, I heard about what Eleanor left you. I just want to say she made the right choice. She told me many times how lonely she felt. But every time she spoke about you, her voice lit up. She called you her angel, her peace, her second chance at love. Thank you for being there when her own blood wasn't." Maria folded the letter gently and placed it next to Eleanor's. She didn't need a throne or power or a title. She had something far more powerful now: respect. And in a quiet room filled with sunlight, she finally smiled, not because she won, but because Eleanor's love had finally been seen. A year had passed. Spring had returned to the Grant mansion, bringing with it warm sunlight and soft breezes that danced through the open windows. The garden outside bloomed brighter than ever, roses, daisies, and lilies filling the air with the scent of life and peace. Maria sat on the front porch, a cup of tea in her hand. She wore a simple blue dress, and her face looked calmer now, stronger. Not because she had money, but because she had finally let herself be seen. The town had changed its view of her. No longer was she just the maid. Neighbors waved. Strangers smiled. Some even came to her for advice or help. And she gave it freely, just as she always had. Inside, the house was alive with warmth. Pictures of Eleanor now hung proudly on the walls, next to new ones. Photos of charity events, girls' schools opening in Eleanor's name, and young women smiling with hope for the future. Maria had turned the fortune into something meaningful, something that healed, not just rewarded. But even now, she never acted like the owner. She simply lived as herself. That afternoon, a car pulled up outside the gate. Maria looked up. Her hands stilled. Out stepped Henry, alone. He walked up the path slowly, his eyes filled with something Maria hadn't seen before: humility. He stood in front of her, unsure of what to say. "Hi," he began softly. I didn't come for anything. I just wanted to say I'm sorry." Maria nodded slowly, watching him. "Not just for what happened after," he continued, "but for every birthday we missed, every call we ignored, every time she hoped we'd come around, and we didn't." His voice cracked. "We were wrong, Maria. All of us." He handed her something. It was a photo, one Maria hadn't seen before. It showed Eleanor holding Maria's hand, laughing in the kitchen. Henry must have found it in one of the old albums. "She looked the happiest in this one," he whispered. Maria looked down at the photo and smiled through misty eyes. "Because she was," she said. There was a pause. Then she quietly stepped aside and opened the door. "Would you like some tea?" Henry nodded, his voice tight. "I'd like that." As he stepped into the house, something shifted, not just between them but in the air. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about forgiveness. Well, healing. And as the camera slowly pulled back, showing the full house with its blooming garden and wide open windows, the story ended not with a fortune, but with a heart finally full.